I'm going to tie up a wet fly today. This is the Magalloway. It's another fly that is in Ray Bergman's book on trout. It's a beautiful little fly. I've had my eye on this one for a while because I like the Peacock sword wings on this. Also, it is just a yarn body. There's no rib on this with a tag of black chenille. A lot of people will refer to that little bit, the black chenille, as a butt, but in the recipe it calls it a tag. Anyway, it's an interesting little fly. I don't know much about the history of this fly. It has a wrapped hackle collar in instead of a throat. But I just like the looks of this, and I just think it'll be a very interesting fly to not only tie, but to fish. So that's the Magalloway. I'll get started. Start the Magalloway by putting my hook in the vise. This is a Mustad 3399 in a size 6. Go ahead and debarb the hook. Now, since the body on this is some brown wool, and I'm using a wool yarn, I don't have to worry about thread color, so I'm just going to go with a 6/0 Danville in black. Attach my thread about an eye length behind the eye of the hook, run it down the shank to tie in the tip. The tip is a gold tinsel. I'm using a Danville size 14 and a silver and gold. Tie that in with the silver side up. Put in 3 more wraps, still going down the hook shank to secure that. And then I'll put in 4 wraps down and back, put in the tip. Oops. One thing about the Mylar tinsel you got to watch out for. If this were a metal tinsel, that wouldn't happen. It would hold its place. When it's wrapped on like that, it would keep its position and everything. The downside about the metal is that if you're not careful, you can cut your thread. But no worries, just finish wrapping it back in. And secure it. There is a tail on the Magalloway, and it is just yellow, is all the recipe calls for. You could use a goose shoulder if you want. I have tied some of these with goose shoulder, but I'm going to use a goose quill. I like the just the look of it a little bit better. I don't know that it necessarily, in terms of fishing it, is going to be better or worse than, say, goose shoulder, or even if you used, say, some rooster hackle barbs or something like that. And I've got these particular slips here. The one on my side is a little bit wider than the one facing the camera, about 1 barb wider. So I'm going to reach in with my bodkin and just peel out one. That just evens it up a little bit. Make certain you get your tips even. I'm going to tie these in about a shank length long. I like them a little bit longer. little pinch and loop, wrap all the way back down to the tip, and trim away this excess. There is a tag on the Magalloway, and it is black chenille. I'm just going to use some size medium black chenille. And I'm using the medium simply because it's a little bit bigger in diameter when I put it on the hook shank than the yarn for the body, so it does stand out a little bit. And also, I only need to get about one wrap of this chenille on here to get the effect that I'm looking for. So notice that when I'm tying this in, I'm stripping away the fluff from the core fibers. That way I'm tying in the actual core of the chenille and not the fluffy fuzz stuff. And I'm leaving just a little bit, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, sticking out from under those thread wraps. That way I come forward about an eye length. That way when I wrap this around, it will start to wrap just here as it touches the bottom. But I don't end up with any fibers that are sticking out towards the back and where I don't want them. You can, if you want, take this and twist it up. I'm going to actually attach my hackle pliers to this. It's so short, it's going to be easier for me to manage this. But you can twist that up if you want that to be a little bit tighter, a little denser. And I'm just going to come around and I'm going to get one wrap, one complete wrap all the way around. Like that. And then tie that off. This gives me a little, some people will call it a butt. The recipe calls it a tag of black chenille. Advance my thread forward just a little bit. For the body, I'm going to use, like I said, the recipe calls for just some brown wool. I suppose you could do that as like a dubbing, a brown wool dubbing. I'm just going to use some yarn. I have some brown, kind of a light brown yarn. Just as easy to do it with this than it is to try and dub that on there. I'm going to tie this in so that I have the end here almost to the end of the body. And the reason for that is as I tie that down to the hook shank as I go forward, it's going to push that out a little bit. Get that wrapped right up against that tag in the back there. You'll notice this yarn is going to get kind of pushed out as it goes, as I go forward. You could always trim that a little bit if you want. I'm going to stay at least an eye length behind the eye of the hook there. There's no rib on this, by the way. Now you'll notice wrapping in all of that, it's kind of pulled the underlying material off to the side. My tail is not straight up off the hook shank now, it's off to the side a little bit. Before I go any further, you can correct that. Just pinch down hard on that, twist the other way, and now I have the tail back to being right up on top of the hook shank. Start wrapping this in. I'm going to let the yarn go ahead and flatten itself out. And then each wrap, I'm going to overlap it about 50%. And that's just going to give me a little bit thicker diameter body on this. Make certain you give yourself a little bit of extra room for the head. We've got a wing and then a hackle that we're going to wrap as a collar, not as a throat. Trim away the excess. The wing on the Magalloway is made from Peacock sword. When you get these in your package, you'll notice that you actually have a right and a left for these. You don't have to do the wing how I'm doing it. If you want to take a bunch of these barbs off of the feather and kind of roll those together in a wing, you can do it that way if you want. But you can also take the right and left and you can sandwich those together so that you have the curve of each of them canceling them, and then the natural curve of the peacock swords will present a little bit more of a wing. And you can see I have the barbs right here longer than the other ones, but that's fine because all in all, it will make for a nice wing. I can trim off those little bits of the rachis that were still on there. And now I have a nice curved wing. I want that to go about halfway down the tail. Inch loop, wrap that in, 4 or 5 wraps to secure it, and I end up with a nice looking wing. Trim away the excess. Put a little bit of wax on my thread. Now you're going to want to, it looks like I'm making the head of the fly, but I'm not. What I'm doing is smoothing this off because I have a hackle to wrap in here, and I'm actually going back just a little bit. But that's going to give me a nice smooth platform for the hackle. The hackle on this is just a brown end saddle, kind of a mottled brown. I like this. I've used it in some other flies because it has some dark and light colors to it. I'm going to peel away the fluff down here at the bottom of this. That will give me a nice little handle for tying this in. I don't need the real fluffy long bits here. You can take those off if you want, or just leave them because when we tie this in, when we're done with it, that will just get cut off. Maybe about a quarter to a third of the way down, I'm going to stroke the barbs in the rearward direction to isolate that tip a little bit. Then I'm going to cut just a little triangle as an anchor. Wrap that in nice and secure, and I like to leave my thread back where I'm wrapping this forward because as I wrap each wrap of that hackle in, the thread will actually kind of help to push it up against the previous wraps by the weight of the bobbin. Attach my hackle pliers. I'm guessing you're picking up that airplane outside. Nice warm, not even spring day, but I've got the windows open. And I'm probably going to get 4, maybe 5 wraps of this hackle. Try to make certain you're not getting any barbs wrapped in a forward-facing direction. That's 3. I'll get 1 more here as I get down towards the eye of the hook. Doesn't have to be a super dense collar. You do want to make certain that the last couple turns, those barbs are long enough to reach back to just about to the point of the hook. Put in a couple wraps to secure that. I'm folding everything back. Now I'm going to come and make the head of this. This just kind of cleans it all up and it gets those barbs all anchored down in a rearward direction. Pop that off. I'm going to flatten my thread. This just helps the base of the head here to be a little bit smoother, so when I put the lacquer on that, it takes a little bit less to smooth it out. Get in about a 8 or 9 turn whip finish here. I'm away my thread. So you don't want that collar of Hackle to be too thick. You could also use a rooster furnace if you want. That's what the recipe calls for, is a furnace Hackle. A little bit of head cement on both sides. I'll come back and put a couple coats of black lacquer on that to finish off the Magalloway. Just a fun fly. Most of the materials you probably already have. You know, like I said, you could use a furnace for the Hackle if you want, a rooster furnace. My rooster furnace that I have isn't that good. Most of the barbs don't get that long. So for this size hook, if I were doing, say, a 10 or something, then I could have that. But I just went with this hen. I think it will work just fine. But if you like working with the Peacock sword, which I do, I think it's just a beautiful material, especially in these wet flies. The Magalloway is a fun fly to tie. So thanks for watching.
Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.